from the University of North Carolina School of Journalism and Mass Communication, covering the full range of Tar Heel athletics. This is Sports Extra.
Hello and welcome to this special fall break edition of Sports Extra. I'm journalism professor Charlie Tuggle, and my guest today is Dr. Richard Southall, who teaches in the Department of Exercise and Sports Science at the university and is also the director of the College Sport Research Institute. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the NCAA. When you hear those letters, some in the sports community want to hold their noses. It's almost like when you say Republican in front of a Democrat or Democrat in front of a Republican. In fact, in his book, The Shame of College Sports, Taylor Branch says the NCAA has an unmistakable whiff of the plantation. That fairly strong words there.
There is, that is a real strong language, and there have been scholars, Earl Smith at Wake Forest and Cornell and Billy Hawkins at the University of Georgia have in fact described college sport, and not just the NCAA, because I think it's important for us to recognize that the NCAA is really in many ways nothing but the trade association for an industry. And so Billy and Earl have characterized college athletic departments, big-time college athletic departments, as plantations. And Dr. Hawkins' book, The New Plantation, describes college athletic departments as neo-colonial enclaves that extract the labor of specifically African-American male athletes and does not deliver on the educational promise. To which, that's the whole basis of the NCAA's collegiate model that they developed in 2003 and now is in all of the literature of the NCAA. So to describe the NCAA in a negative way on a college campus, it's sort of like, we have seen the enemy and it is us, is really, sometimes it's easy to criticize or have a bad taste in our mouth about this entity in Indianapolis, but the NCAA is a member organization.
A report came out just this week from the Association of Governing Boards of Colleges and Universities. It said basically what you said, the enemy is us, and this quotes from the report. University presidents, with little if any input from trustees and governors, created and unleashed the NCAA on the world, and long ago ceded any control.
You bet. Well, and I think what's interesting is many college presidents, chancellors, provosts, the upper administration at colleges and universities really don't know the industry of college sport. There are distinct subcultures within college athletics, and quite often provosts, presidents, those folks, they have a dual responsibility. They are charged with raising revenue and profile of their universities. And the sport media industry is a very large and very powerful media industry. You go into any bar or restaurant of any type pretty much in the United States, and you'll see sports on the television. I don't care if it's a five-star restaurant or, a chicken and wings place. Sport is ubiquitous, and college sport is a tremendous part of our culture. And I think what's interesting about that Board of Governor's report, AGB report, is that it's off, they were talking about that maybe real reform will come from the Board of Governors. Well, Board of Governor members, there's a prominent president at a Southeastern Conference university that described one of his biggest problems that he had was a Board of Governors that thought they were NFL owners. And they looked at their college football team as theirs, and they looked at the players in much the same way as owners in the NFL look at players. They're labor to many of these folks.
The report calls for boards of governors, boards of trustees to take a more active role. it seems like you're saying that's not necessarily going to solve anything.
Well, again, it's hard to see a board of governors. When board of governors are in the president's box or other luxury suites and high-fiving at a big-time football game, I don't think that those are the folks that are really willing or able to take a hard, cold, dispassionate look at the industry that they've helped create.
It's entertainment, it's school spirit, it's all those things, but it's a billion-dollar industry, multi-billion dollar industry. How can you ever reconcile the academic mission of a university with a billions of dollars industry inside the university?
Well, in 2003, Miles Brand, the late president of the NCAA, developed a term, or it was developed in conjunction with other staff at the NCAA, called the collegiate model of athletics. And over the last 9 to 10 years, that collegiate model has been talked about on just almost an every other year basis in the NCAA President's State of the Association address. And the fundamental part of the collegiate model that is sacrosanct is that amateurism describes the participants, not the enterprise. And that's what Miles was dealing with, and the NCAA and college presidents are grappling with. They've now attempted to redefine college sport as only amateur when regards to the players. According to the collegiate model of athletics, commercialism is good. Commercialism is necessary to support the collegiate model, because you have, at whatever university, if you have 28 sports that you're sponsoring, 26 of those or 25 of those or a high percentage of those are not revenue generating sports. They cost. So in an economic analysis, you must have high commercialization in football and men's basketball in order to support this amateur enterprise for the majority of the students. And that's the basis of the NCAA's public service campaign, saying 400,000 students, most of whom are going pro in something other than sports. What that basically says is we must have commercialization. We must maximize revenues in order to provide these opportunities. So it's business on the revenue production side, but philanthropy on the expenditure side, or education on the expenditure side. And so the only people that need be amateurs within this collegiate model are the players. But the players are in fact compensated, but they just aren't paid. And in the NCAA bylaws, it defines pay as compensation not approved by the association. So even though compensation and pay are synonymous in the English language, in the NCAA manual, they're distinct.
To say that, let's look at just the revenue-producing sports, football, men's basketball, and a few cases, some other sports,
Right.
but primarily those two. To say that the athletes are considered amateur, but the enterprise is considered commercial, seems like a distinction without a difference. Because without the players, there is no sport.
That's right. And what's interesting in this, and I've spoken about this and written about this, is that everyone except the players has access to a market economy. And so as I joke with players that I would have in class, I say, there is a hard cap. You just didn't have any opportunity to negotiate that cap, because college athletes, most people don't know, but college athletes are technically not members of the NCAA. They have no voting rights within the organization. They have no right to speak at the convention or deliberate on committees. Now in Division III, college athletes do have voting rights on committees, but in Division I, any college athlete that's on a committee is there in an advisory capacity only. And so you have an entity or a trade association or a member organization in which the labor, if you're doing an economic analysis, the labor has no right to speak. And since the courts have found players are not employees, they don't have a right to collectively bargain, because participation in college athletics is a privilege, not a right.
Ramogi Huma is based in California, former college athlete, and now advocates on behalf of athlete rights. Do you see what they're doing there as maybe the first step toward athletes having more of a voice in the system?
Well, the NCPA, or the National College Players Association, was really formed, and Ramogi would probably concur on this, dealing with some health issues and the full cost of attendance issue that still has not been resolved. But players getting injured in voluntary workouts and losing their yearly grant and aids, those types of things. And so the NCPA is not a true players association in the sense that they have the opportunity to bargain collectively, but the NCPA has been very influential in getting these issues in front of members of Congress and more specifically state legislatures, because I just really don't see, for many of the same reasons as Board of Governors, that members of Congress are going to take this issue up as their major issue that they're going to campaign on or deal with. So yeah, I think the NCPA has done a really good job of carving out a space in which they can have some input.
If not boards of governors, if not Congress, who? If there needs to be change in the NC2A, there seems to be fairly common agreement in the sports world that something needs to happen, who does it?
Well, it's interesting, because then the next group would be the players themselves. But you have players that come in for a short period of time. It's sort of when you're a first-year student or your first year on college campus, those athletes are just happy to be there. They've gone through a really interesting recruiting process, and high-profile athletes are donning their cap on ESPN, and they're on campus, and they're a rock star. And they're traveling, on jets to play here and there and so on and so forth, and before large crowds. And that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And then, their sophomore year, many of them are in basketball. If you're a really talented player, you're probably either getting ready to leave or you're looking towards that NBA career. And in football, the same way. If you're looking at those things, and everybody thinks they're going to play in the league. I mean, that's what you've been raised your entire life to think. Whether you're a left tackle at Northwestern State, you still think that you're going to, play in the league. And so the players, by the time they realize and see the system, and it's interesting talking to players from when they're first year to when they're a junior, their view of the system is much different, but they're out of the system. And then if they complain as a former player or want to effectuate any change, they're seen as disgruntled. Look what all we did for you, at the university. We provided you, and oftentimes it's framed as a free education. So players don't seem to be able to organize in that way, because they really, in many ways, are disenfranchised from the whole process. They don't have the voting rights, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's many researchers that think that the courts are the avenue for change, because since it is so much money involved, and there is such a disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and between the value of a college education and the commercial enterprise. Because quite often the education is talked about in a retail sense, and it's not really looked at that these educational opportunities are deeply discounted for players. So I'm among those that think that the courts, this really is something for the courts to look at, because within the system, it's hard for us that are within the system, administrators, coaches, media, folks that are all involved. The earth looks flat when you're within the system. You don't see the curvature of the earth until you get up into the stratosphere. And so those that are within the system and working within the system, I don't really think that they can be the ones to make change. So in much the same way that segregation in the educational system did not come about really in higher education from Board of Governors. It was mandated by the federal government through the courts. I will be interested to see if whether the courts take this up over the next 4 to 5 years.
You bring up the legal aspects of all of this, and in his book, The Shame of College Sports, Taylor Branch said not only is it sort of a plantation type system, but that student athletes don't get their constitutional rights to due process.
You bet. Well, the NCAA, being a private member organization, does not need to provide due process for college athletes. It is not a state actor. In 1988, in the Tarkanian v. NCAA case, the NCAA was seen to not be a state actor. There are some legal scholars that think that threshold has been crossed now, that the NCAA is involved or entangled, using nexus entanglement theory, in state action. The NCAA has been involved in some federal court cases that NCAA information was used to prosecute. And I think the Penn State situation, in which the NCAA seemed to take on the role of a governmental entity, or at least a quasi-governmental entity, that may be a real interesting thing. That there's some, again, legal scholars that are publishing and writing now, looking at this, that the NCAA should be revisited as now being a state actor, which would require them to provide due process for athletes.
Of course, the Sandusky case at Penn State raises all of these issues. The NC2A imposed what some people have called draconian measures against the football program for something that, yes, it happened in the football facility, and yes, it involved a football coach, but it had nothing to do with recruiting or the playing of the games, or it was a criminal matter, some people say.
And that's interesting, because I've not seen specific violations or guidelines or an infractions report been published, and they referred to the free report that was a basis for a lot of what they did. And the NCAA is on record as saying that draconian measures or whatever, that does not set a precedent. And they've said this is not setting a precedent. Well, I don't see how it cannot set a precedent, because it happened, and so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the future, when a university maybe does something that the NCAA needs to address from a public relations standpoint.
Still talking about the courts, C. Thomas McMillan, former NC2A and NBA basketball player, also a representative from Maryland, says that at some point he predicts that the courts will intervene and the system will collapse. Do you see it happening?
I really think that in the current system, the way it is, I feel that the ongoing litigation, the O'Bannon-Keller case, is a very interesting case that will call into question the collegiate enterprise and the lack of due process and the use of contractual type instruments to obtain the use of the athlete's name and likeness. Because, like you said earlier, without the athletes, there is no college sport. It's like the line from The Right Stuff, the movie where John Glenn is talking to the other astronauts, Mercury astronauts, and he says, "No Bucks, no Buck Rogers." And without the athletes that we all cheer for on Saturdays and Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays, or whatever day it is now, without those athletes' name and likeness, there's no collegiate model with its college sport enterprise. So I think that the O'Bannon case is a very interesting case. I would not dismiss that case lightly at all. I think it is going to be over the next 4 to 5 years where this will play out.
If we want to look for someone who is shouting the message from the rooftops that there needs to be reform, we don't have to look very far. Bill Friday, President Emeritus of the UNC system and a member of the Knight Commission for a couple of decades, has long said this system is broken. We have to fix this because the influence of money has just ruined college athletics.
Well, it has, and it's interesting. When I first came to the University of North Carolina, one of the first people that reached out to me for a conversation was Mr. Friday. And over the last 4 to 5 years, we meet on a regular basis just to talk. He has a wealth of knowledge and understanding of the system. And I think what's happened with the continued, ramping up of this enterprise, it's always been this uneasy coexistence between commercialism and an educational enterprise, or the education on our college campuses. But now it's just a matter of degree, that it's so hard to ignore. So I think that this has always been the case to a large degree, but now instead of it being, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and when college coaches, made $30,000 to $40,000 a year, about on par with what a faculty member made, and when college football coaches were faculty members and taught courses, and the only thing that you had was the stadium, and you didn't really have broadcast. But when things started broadcasting, and now the concept really is monetization, digitization and monetization of content. And so you have so many additional ways for the college sport product to be consumed that all are generating money. And so, it's just harder to ignore what it is. And what it is not inherently bad. But what's bad is, in my opinion, is denying equal access to the enterprise. If it is business, well then let's say it's business, and labor and management and all these people should have equal access to that. Nobody's calling for the disbandment of the NFL because the players are getting, their piece of the pie. But when you continue to hold the line and saying college athletes will not be paid, and your rationale is that they learn these virtues. Well, it's interesting, if you read an NFL coach's comments or see their comments in press conference and so on, they always talk about teamwork and hard work and perseverance and how the team learns these things, seemingly the same thing that they learn in college playing sport. The difference is they're getting paid, but they're still learning those same lessons, and players talk about this camaraderie, and it's culturally, because while colleges are very important, pro football teams, and specifically NFL teams, are very important to their cities and their regions, just in the same way that, the University of Alabama may be the same as the New England Patriots, just in different parts of the country, and the players on the Patriots getting paid.
Sure. Frank DeFord is a highly respected writer for Sports Illustrated, and is one of the folks who's weighed in to say we're being hypocritical to say that athletes come to the university in the high-profile sports, come to the university to be students. They come to be athletes, and then maybe they go to class. And he's calling for just the elimination of that whole mindset. If you're bringing them in to be athletes, say that that's what you're doing.
Right, because that's not a bad thing. And I'm continually fascinated that nobody seems to care if snowboarders or skiers go to college or don't go to college, and they compete in the Olympics, and nobody makes an issue of that, that they go to ski. Barcelona, great soccer team, has an academy that players go to that academy to learn how to play soccer. Now, they can go to school, and they do go to school at the same time, but nobody says that they're going to this Barcelona academy for anything other than to learn how to play the beautiful game. So what I find fascinating is there's just two sports that were really wedded to that, and it just so happens that those are the sports that generate the most revenue, because we have Olympic sport athletes that are leaving school, taking a year off or this or that to train for the Olympics, to play with, under 20 teams or under 18 teams in soccer and other sports, and nobody seems, bothered by that. But those aren't the sports that are generating the revenue. And those athletes are lauded for taking a year off to go compete in the Olympics. But nobody would let an athlete in football go compete in the NFL for a couple of years and come back to school. So why do they need to make this progress towards a degree in this cookie-cutter fashion? And they must, well, those things have been negotiated in the collective bargaining agreements with the NFL and the NBA. That's why players have to go to college for a year or go overseas. That was negotiated as part of a labor contract. So the influences of those labor contracts on the college game are undeniable. So you're right. I just think, it's not a bad thing. Evidently, capitalism is a good thing, we think. So let's let the players have access to the market. Because there are a number of college athletes on this campus and in campuses across the country that would, I think, very much enjoy being full-time students when they could devote their full attention to their studies. So many of them, I think, would be very interested in being able to choose their own major after they've had their professional career, and then they realize, wow, here's the real world. I have to prepare myself for my next 40 years and obtain a bona fide college degree. And it's tough to be an athlete and take classes at the same time. And I think we are not providing equal access to the education for these athletes. That's what, more than anything else, seems to me that is lost in the discussion, is are these athletes getting an equal access to an education, or are we not giving them either? We're not paying them what their market wage is, and we're not providing them an equal access to the education of other students.
Some really big questions that we're not going to answer in 30 minutes.
That's right.
But at least perhaps we shed some light on it, and we appreciate it very much.
Well, and that's what we do through CSRI. We're supporting research of faculty across the country and within our own unit. We have a whole unit of sport administration faculty that we grapple with these issues, and we don't agree all the time on these issues, but my colleagues and I within sport administration, we're training the next generation of students to work within college sport, and these students need to be aware of these issues. So we have these open, honest discussions quite frequently.
Dr. Richard Southall, the director of the College Sport Research Institute here on the UNC campus, and a noted expert in all things college sport. And Richard, we appreciate it very much, you being here with us on this special fall break edition of Sports Extra.
Thanks, Charlie.
The first day stepping on the court, I couldn't keep up. That motivated me to step up my game. When I reach a goal, I set a new one the next day. And my next goal is to go to college. Mastering the court takes persistence. So does getting into college. I've got what it takes. So do you.